Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. This is Mujeeb Kazi, and you're watching Washington Roundtable on VOK, Voice of Kashmir TV. I'm joined by Ambassador Dr. Jameel Ahmed Khan, who is the former ambassador to Pakistan, and he is a seasoned diplomat who analyzed an analytical viewpoint of view on the current situation. We are going to talk about the current Prime Minister of India's visit to Washington, his record of human rights violation. He has on his record one time when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he burned live in front of the world over 2,000 Muslim in the state of Gujarat. And then he is an active member, actually one of the leading member of RSS, which is an organization that derives its ideology from the Nazi of Germany. And at one time he was banned to enter in USA, and unfortunately the situation have changed. And now he's the Prime Minister of India. He is being welcomed in the White House, which considered to be the symbol of democracy for the world, as well as current President of US, Joe Biden, who claims to be the champion of human rights, is welcoming him. And there's a contradiction that we will talk about it. Ambassador, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
What do you make of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington?
The Prime Minister visit to Washington is in two parts. One is obviously he's come to the United States for participation in the United Nations General Assembly. That's one part, but the Washington visit is altogether the geopolitical visit of of Modi, where they are going to discuss sets of the geopolitical development and dynamics in the region and around the world, and where the two countries' leader, Joe Biden and Modi, it appears they are going to discuss and draw further strategies along with their team of Indo-Pacific Ocean, and what way there could be resistance of all kind against the China. So that is one aspect, but at the same time, Modi would try and attain his further stature in terms of the fact that he would like to have some cover what he has been doing during his past tenure of prime ministership in Kashmir in particular, and in India as well. So basically, it has again two dimensions. One is India always utilizes these global geostrategic dynamics and the interest of US in their own interest of basically advocating and advancing their overall plan of RSS, whose political wing is BJP. So, and once I indicate that at the macro level, that is what it appears, that they would like to have a cover against all kind of violation which they are making in Kashmir, and against the Citizens Act in India, against the atrocities against minorities in India, and against the lynching of the minorities, particularly in Muslim in India. So if that cover is not taken, then in that case, India can be penalized and can be brought under the international law and international justice. So the other dimension from the US point of view, from Joe Biden points of view, he has two choices. One, that he is the proponent of the human rights. This what as a senator and as a vice president he has been mentioning and he has been advocating. And then second aspect is, how is he going to attain or advance in his mission, in his foreign policy goals in this region, particularly the Indo-Pacific Ocean against China. The policy which was there against China during Trump time, or particularly during Trump time, it was evolved even much before. But the same policy, almost with different wordings, is being told by Joe Biden. So, having said so, very recent Quads meeting and the agreement of this Australia, UK, and US. All these things, if we have in our mind, then this what is going to be. Some of these points are going to be perhaps discussed with the Joe Biden meeting. But the overall behind the curtain aim and objective, it appears, of Modi government and Modi is the RSS based all the plans which they have even for future of this India. So and the way they have planned, the Indians, the Modi administration has planned to deal with Kashmir and to deal with the minorities, particularly in Muslim. So that cover, I guess he will have it. And what way can he have this cover from Joe Biden? Joe Biden so far has hardly criticized, hardly has mentioned, hardly has taken any resolution into General Assembly or Security Council, or hardly has given any indication that if nothing else, he might as well go for some sanction in light of the human rights violation which is taking place in India. So he has not done any of these things, and I am not expecting that Joe Biden is going to mention about human rights violation in India, even in his speech. And probably, if I remember it correctly, there was hardly any mention of Joe Biden in the General Assembly speech, or even in this meeting of the joint communique, which I'm expecting. I don't think he's going to make a very strong mention about the human rights violation or what is happening around in India. So what does it boil down to? It boils down to one thing, that India now, as a countermeasure against China, is acceptable in all forms of whatever it does against the human rights violation, which comes under the which comes under the ambit of violation of international law. And what is that international law? If such violation takes place in a territory which is disputed, such as Kashmir, then Geneva Convention Article 49 is applicable on that. And if that happens, then that also attracts the statutes of International Criminal Court, Article 8 of the International Criminal Court. This the same article is being applied by other Kosovo and other places, but this article, I guess, would not be applied against people who are doing these atrocities, including Modi. See what happened about Gujarat. Gujarat massacre had taken place. Modi was fully involved. The European human rights investigation teams had proved it and had found that he is the person behind the whole game of Gujarat massacre. And the US itself had imposed travel restrictions on Modi because of the Gujarat massacre. But once he became the prime minister, the interest converged, and the interest of India and US converged. So everything is fair in such achievement of goals of their foreign policy and the interest. So therefore, the world will keep having such human rights violation at so many places, whether it's Kashmir or Palestine or Syria or what happened in Iraq and what happened in Afghanistan, so or what is happening even now. So all these, I think, events and all these attitude for the screen of the camera would be different, and for the purpose of implementing their goals and implementing their targets, I think they would not really bother about such violation once it comes to convergence of interest. Yes, if it's a collision of interest, then of course all these laws can be implemented.
Well, the human rights violation is one thing, and not talking about while they're meeting at the Quad session in White House is another thing. But I'm pretty sure that they are well aware of the history of India, because India, for the longest of its time, have been in line with then Soviet Union, and they were reaping the fruits of their economical developments, the armaments, the weapons, and they were when there were two superpowers, they were in line with the Soviet Union. The moment Soviet Union collapsed, they changed their alignment with US. So if they were not loyal to Soviet Union, why would US will think that India will ever be loyal to or maybe of any use in your analysis about the China Pacific Ocean treaty that they are trying to utilize India against China. Uh, don't you think that they would U.S. is making a huge mistake because compared to Pakistan, who has not only sacrificed 80,000 people in order for to fight the war that they were not even part of. So why do you think the U.S. would trust India in first thing, and secondly, why on earth? What is that main reason that the President Biden would not talk to Indian Prime Minister during his meeting in Washington that he need to stop human rights violation, protect the rights of the minorities, give the due rights to the people of Kashmir, and accept that the Muslims living in India are the Indian citizens, why they are being treated as second class citizens.
Well, if we assume that the Joe Biden and his administration are the proponent of the human right violation in its true sense, then yes, all these things might as well be considered during the meeting and might as well be made as a talking point. But if we review the development of the geopolitical situation in this entire region and the way U.S. Uh, uh, tries to attempt to engage with the people and with the world has now amply clear has been amply clear now that U.S. Goes for such interest which may compromise all these international values and international law. And I just gave you the example. Now, second is why U.S. should trust India. Now, US feels, I guess, in my opinion, US feels that they have been able to enter into a legal instrument, that is the international legal instrument, in which they have the pact, the Defense Cooperation Pact, and they have the pact on information technology exchange. They have about two, three more pacts. And by virtue of which Indians have given them Gujarat seaport for the in the garb of logistics, but that could be utilized and probably being utilized for other military purposes as well. So that is one aspect, and second aspect is India feels that if they align with the US, probably they'll be much better off as compared to how much better off. Now, India feels that the US in technology, they are now have the joint ventures on manufacturing of so many defense armament, equipment, vessel systems, aircraft assembly, aircraft maintenance. So all these things India won't have got it. India got the best of the best from Russia, and once the Cold War was over, as you indicated, they are trying to get the best of the best from here. Now, whether they would be utilized, whether they would come up to the expectations, excuse me, come up to the expectations of the United States against China, I think the time would be the best judge. India, the way they are posturing themselves vis-a-vis U.S. policy, I don't think they would be left with much choice but to get involved into this dispute between the two big powers. And this Cold War has already started between China and India, and their interest is being clashed. See what is happening around in India and Indo-Pacific Ocean. You know, there are quad military exercises. There are submarine being sold by India, the nuclear submarine, the submarine contract being cancelled of France, and there are exercises. There are military exercises between Japan, Australia. The military exercises between India, Japan, Australia. So all, and then there are sailing exercise in the state of Malacca, infuriating Chinese, and Chinese getting compelled to give a very strong statement that you are crossing the red lines. So what once we review all, and then latest Quad and Australia, UK, and US ACOS agreement, China has also raised its voice on that. So India is now a major player in this entire posturing and entire the alignment of the US interest and the combined converging interest of the Quad members and the other members in that region, including Philippines and Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and all these countries. So from that perspective, if we see, India might be thinking that they can get away from this development, but they are reaching to a level of a level from where it will be very hard for them to return. And if they return from there, then they will have to pay. They will probably be made to pay a heavy cost, not only in the in the light of international laws and agreements, what has been done between these Quad countries and US in particular with India. Not only by that, but otherwise also their deployment, their employment, and their posturing in the foreign policy of India. It will be very hard for them to walk out from there. Yes.
So in this whole scenario, where the Pakistan fits in?
Pakistan is automatically being pushed, although Pakistan believes in multilateralism. Multilateralism, and Pakistan believes in engaging with all countries of the world. Pakistan is still is trying. You know, yesterday our foreign minister, Pakistan foreign minister, has met with the Secretary of State, U.S. Blinken. So Pakistan is always open, but somehow the U.S. has always had with the relationship with Pakistan. It was not a strategic relation they maintained. It's only the transitional relation, and it was a roller coaster type of a relation. Now they have been having the best engagement of Pakistan in their favor, which was Doha agreement and the engagement with Taliban. They wanted to come out from their recent past I'm talking about. Otherwise, if we go into the history from U2 and airbase and from 62 onward, we can review all these cooperation which Pakistan had given, but Pakistan was not really recognized in view of not only the advantages given to the US, not only Pakistan has a huge contribution. I don't know whether if we review that contribution, whether US deserved it or not, but that contribution where US became the unipolar power of the entire world because of Pakistan contribution. Once Pakistan got fully involved in giving resistance to USSR, and USSR crumbled later on. So to that extent, Pakistan had gone. Pakistan joined. I may not agree with the policy of the policymakers and the head of state at that time, the way they got involved in war on terror, and as a result suffered the lives of about 80,000 people, and the overall about 150 billion dollars losses. So all these things, if we review, then probably it was all in the Pakistan did not get anything from this relation. So your question, where does Pakistan stand? Pakistan still wants to have its multilateral engagement, but the way I find the development and the attitude and the foreign policy of the United States, it appears that they are in a mood to make Pakistan, or they hide behind the fact that by making Pakistan or some of the countries as scapegoat about their failure in Afghanistan. So from that angle, Pakistan would, I think, continue to have its foreign policy in which we'll have multilateralism. But now we are in this bloc. Whether we like it or not, whether good, bad, or worse, we are in the bloc where we have China, Russia, and all the central countries, Turkey, Iran, all the SCO members, and all the Shanghai Cooperation members, and the ECO member, except India. Shanghai Cooperation once we talk about Shanghai cooperation, the way the development is taking place, I don't think India would continue to stay in Shanghai Cooperation Organization because there would be a conflict of interest to have India in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in the future development. I'm talking about whether it's this year, next year, or many years afterward. But I don't see India would continue to be a member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization because of this geostrategic and geopolitical conflict of interest with this. Although the Charter of Shanghai Cooperation Organization does not have any mention, and obviously it cannot have any mention about the conflict of interest with other countries, but the posturing and the deployment, the way it is taking place, it automatically goes detrimental to the interest of the members of the ECO, Economic Cooperation Organization, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in the countries of this very bloc where we are located.
So looking at the SCO conference and then the Prime Minister's of Pakistan statement, and then what we saw, what happened, the New Zealand team, decided not to play in Pakistan. And then the next day we saw the press conference by the two of the federal ministers giving the digital detail of the conspiracy that was created in India, and then obviously end up having this, a huge shock to the fan of not the sport of cricket, but it's considered to be more political than it's a sport. So, what are your analysis on that? Do you think it was already planned? Do you think Quad was part of it, or it was just fifth generation war, what ISPR calls it?
If we review it, the way development had taken place, the withdrawal of New Zealand team and its impact on Pakistan, impact of Pakistan image, impact, of course, with the sentiments of the people of Pakistan, the cricket lover, that definitely has been heard. But going beyond that point, I would say Pakistan image and the confidence of the investor in Pakistan. So a couple of more things. All these things have really impacted Pakistan very hugely. So that only happens if you utilize these events and rope it into the overall strategy of the fifth generation war. Fifth generation war does not leave the traces where you can really clearly indicate that yes, such and such country, such and such pace. Although the press conference has given a complete thread and the technical leads, how it happened and where it happened, from where it was generated, all those things had been given as a dossier. Now, since the world is not really willing to listen to such things, if the world was having any pathetic consideration on the human right, the Kashmir example was one. If the world had any conscious of the violation of international law, then Palestine, Kashmir, and the way bombardment had taken place in Iraq, and the bombardments had taken place in Afghanistan for next 50 to 200 years, there is going to be an impact of the depleted uranium. As all the weapons, precision weapons, they carry depleted uranium. And there have been surveyed by national organization in Iraq, and probably the same survey would be conducted in Afghanistan. How long is it going to affect the children living in those areas where tons and tons of bombardment had taken place? And what are the incapacitation of even those children who are being born or retarded in those places? So long term, if we see all these human rights violations has been ignored by once it comes to the interest of the international big powers and big players. So from that angle, if we look at this fifth generation war in New Zealand, I would say that yes, it has been made as part of the fifth generation war, the way they have withdrawn from the game, and that it could have been averted. As a matter of fact, New Zealand team, I would assume that Pakistan authorities had asked them to reconsider. And if the New Zealand security component, starting from their their government, and as well as the security advisors of the New Zealand Cricket Board, if they had reviewed it, probably they would have found out some different facts, and they would have probably thought to reconsider and play again. But they just declared emergency in a way that the world should view as if something, big is happening in the security in Pakistan, and therefore Pakistan, is not the country where one could invest or go. None of the countries have really changed their travel advisory. Pakistan, if we just normal on a open media or open source, if we do the research, Pakistan, there are very few incidents of this nature, and those incidents are directly connected with certain organization which Pakistan has already mentioned. Life as normal. Everything is going on in as normal in Pakistan. The offices are working, the judiciary is working, the government instruments are working, citizens are having their normal thing. So under these circumstances, withdrawal of the team of New Zealand, I think it doesn't really make any sense. And if we talk about professional assessment of the New Zealand, we respect. It's a sovereign country; they can have their own assessment. But then they also should follow the world framework, the world protocol, how to do this a reassessment of such alert. Even if they had got the alert which they thought that is of a very serious nature, and which was authenticated. In that case, they could have, in view of the A, bilateral relation with New Zealand or Pakistan, B, that so much of sentiments of the cricket lovers of entire world was already focused on that event of the sports. So they could have done the reassessment. They could have stayed another 3 days, 4 days, 1 week, had done their restatement in the same area, and then they would have announced that, okay, we still find this security threat. But the Five Eyes, Five Eyes, which are part of the Quads, if they have shared some information and they have not really shared that information with the local authorities and have not reviewed it themselves, Pakistan would not challenge their judgment. I understand it, but at least Pakistan has all the right to discuss, or from the professional point of view, from the diplomatic point of view, as to how it could have been done. Even if they had, they should have shared that. They should have not only shared, they should have asked for extra information from the host country. They could have reviewed, and then they could have taken the decision in consultation with the host government. At first place, once they have already done their security assessment before coming, they were doing it on daily basis. They were doing it very frequently. Then, in that case, in all fairness and in all in view of the protocol of dealing with such matter, I think they could have very conveniently. And therefore, we feel that it is part of the fifth generation war.
Thank you very much. I know we are end of our time. In the last 2 minutes, in your assessment, what would be the fallout of Taliban victory in Afghanistan over Kashmir?
Well, Taliban fallout over Kashmir, if let's take it in its true spirit. What was the movement of Taliban? In fact, US had gone there to crush terrorism. And terrorism was initiated, 9/11 was initiated by the people, none of them were Afghanis. Okay, Taliban can be blamed that they had harbored them, fine enough. Taliban Mullah Omar, according to my information, the literature available, had agreed to try Osama bin Laden in some third country, not US, because US became the interested party. And in third, they had even offered, according to the information, offered that he could be taken to Switzerland and tried, or Turkey, we could be taken to Turkey, who is the NATO ally, and could have been tried. But they did not agree with that, right? So once you dislodge someone or some sovereign government and sovereign representative of the nation, then any movement would be defined as the freedom fighter. Now, if we define them as a freedom fighters, and that comes under the definition and under the purview of General Assembly Resolution 2649. And if we read General Assembly Resolution 2649, then Taliban, I would not support any act of terrorism if it was ever generated by Taliban, but their freedom struggle and freedom movement within their own soil, that is defined in the General Assembly resolution and also in the UN Charter, that you cannot really go and invade a sovereign country, whatever form of government they had and whatever way they were going, right? It was sovereign country and they were the legitimate government. Whether people, the three countries had already accepted that government and others had not, that was their prerogative. So that was one. Second, Taliban, what is going to be now Taliban's attitude? Security Council resolution of 9th September, they have shown some expectations, and those expectations are no human right violation, women right, and all-inclusive government. Day before yesterday, Taliban have announced the all-inclusive in a way that they have included the Hazara, Uzbeks, and Tajiks in the government. They have pledged and committed that all what is given in Security Council resolution in a different way and different style, they've been mentioning that they are going to do it, and they've started doing it. Number one. Number two, the Taliban, if they are not supported in a way that they have about $10 billion confiscated by the US, if it's not released, the other support, because 75% of the funding of the Afghanistan was done from outside sources, in US being the champion of it. So if you stop altogether, what is going to happen? Obviously, people will not get salary, they'll start dying, they will have the weapons, and then they will start finding other means. Then again, there would be a disruption, there would be a disturbance, there would be a civil riot, and it would become a home ground like even now Somalia has Al-Shabaab. And if you make a country totally destabilized, ungovernable by Taliban, then the problem, even the Prime Minister Imran Khan and other countries, neighboring countries, they are quite apprehensive that that would become detrimental for Pakistan. As a matter of fact, Pakistan is again if that happens, it's going to be a victim once again, and Pakistan would not like that, and the world, as a matter of fact, because the other entities and other groups of terrorist group, whether it's ISIS, Daesh, or any other group, they can start operating from there, and then again Afghanistan and Afghan Taliban and other people would be blamed. So in fact, the world is seriously considering that they should not let Taliban reach to the level of ungovernable, and if that happens, that's going to destabilize. But a bigger question arises here, and the researchers and people like myself are really focusing on one more point. Are the big powers serious to keep Afghanistan stabilized? Because if it's stabilized, they feel that China would have been a bigger beneficiary, and the CPAC and the BRI would be a success. So would they want the CPAC and BRI to be a success? The answer is no. So the other question is, the complexity of the problem is, do they want a controlled destabilization? My view is that yes, perhaps the big powers, they feel that Afghanistan should remain under controlled destabilization so that the connectivity of the BRI and the CPAC does not really take place in the near future, and therefore China would be checked in its further growth, both the economic growth and the military growth.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so much for being on the show. That brings us to the end of our today's talk. Take good care of yourself. Until next time.
All right. Thank you very much for having me. All the best. Bye-bye.